Thank you. Like Sophie, I've got a bit of a personal experience of this as a parent, but I've been to a number of conferences where there's a panel of people with lived experience. They can be the worst debates sometimes. Everyone has to clap and sort of feel sorry for them. No one debates anything. So hopefully we don't do that to you, and hopefully the insights will be helpful. But my son has autism. He also has ADHD. In fact, you might say, doesn't everybody have ADHD? It's ADHD Awareness Month this month. It's also Menopause Awareness Month. I think there's a session on that actually later on today. It's Black History Month. It's LGBT History Month. Last week we had World Mental Health Day, we had World Homeless Day, and World Coming Out Day. In April, sadly we missed it, there was Neurodiversity Awareness Month. When we were told to celebrate the differences, that's an important word, differences, in the brain as strengths. To celebrate the differences in the brain as strengths. There was an article in Psychology Today. It's not a magazine I read ordinarily, but for the purposes of this talk, I had a look at it, and there was a headline in there that said, neurodiversity is an identity and not a disorder. Now, my son doesn't identify with autism. He is autistic. Yeah. He doesn't put it on like a pair of shoes. It's more like a stick of rock that runs right through him. It's also hard to feel celebratory when you're a parent of an autistic child. It's different for every parent, it's different for every child, but it can have a profound effect on their lives in a number of different ways. It can also have its good parts, like he's a very good goalkeeper. Because he's obsessive, he doesn't take the blame for anything, so he blames it on his defenders, and so he's a typical goalkeeper. So it kind of has its positives as well. But one of the more difficult issues with autism is demand avoidance. There's a big debate between psychiatry and the SEND industry, the special educational needs industry, where the SEND industry will often talk about PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance. Psychiatrists will say there's no such thing as pathological demand avoidance, it's a profile of autism. Those sort of debates go on. I tend to agree with the psychiatrists. It makes more sense to me that would be the case. But that word pathology, I think, is important. I think we don't pathologise enough sometimes, which may seem counter to what we're talking about here, but we tend not to make that distinction. And you'll find that those who have this neurodiversity outlook, they will say there's no such thing as pathology, everyone's just different. Everyone has different divergent ways of functioning cognitively. On the other hand, they're very keen to label. So there's this kind of creation of new labels and a kind of a tendency to kind of push this idea that people should be labelled. So it's a label without a pathology. That seems to be the approach. I think what that does is it leads to confusion, and other speakers have spoken about this, of the everyday problems such as depression, anxiety, feeling unhappy, with clinical problems. So you have this kind of widespread explosion of all sorts of issues affecting adults and children. So you hear more about dysregulation, not just around autism, but kids generally in the classroom. Sensory problems, every child seems to be wandering around with headphones all of a sudden. Mental health problems, special educational needs, all of these things are kind of spiralling out of control at the moment. There's a big increase in disability benefits for things like ADHD and depression and autism, both again for children and adults. Now it seems to me that they can't all be sick. Why would they all be sick all at the same time with the same sorts of things? It makes no sense. So it has to be something else. I think there is an element of contagion, as has been said, but I don't think they're making it up. I think there's a misattribution of the problem. They're blaming something else. And I think we do that a lot. You'll see it in schools, we talk about conduct disorders. There's something called ODD, oppositional defiance disorder. So we tend to go to that rather than explain things in terms which I think make more sense. Looking at the home situation, looking at the school ethos, asking do adults have the right enough authority at home, in the school and elsewhere in society. So I think those are the sorts of questions we should be asking instead. So why would anybody want to identify with a condition, a difficult condition, a troubling condition, or an inherited characteristic, or a feeling that they're in the wrong body? Why would they want to do that? It's quite a perverse thing to do. I don't have any answers necessarily, but I think part of the problem is that children and adults are encouraged to feel very vulnerable. They may be looking for a sense of meaning. They may be looking for an explanation, or they might be trying to avoid another explanation. And that's met with this industry, the SEND industry, this notion of neurodiversity, identity politics. They all kind of don't answer people's questions. So just to conclude, I think the issue we have is more of a cultural affliction. I think we're inventing these new disorders when it'd be much more helpful if we actually try to dig into the real nature of problems, actually looked at what's underneath our noses. So in effect, we're not as aware as we think we are. We could be more self-aware.
Right.